Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Welcome to this Concise Webinar. My name is Richard Keeves. This webinar is called How to Get Better Results from Google Ads. And I am joined today by my fellow director at Concise Digital, Gareth Lane. Gareth, come on down.
That would be me. Hello, everyone. My name's Gareth. I've been asked to come up with a new intro. So this is my new intro. My name's Gareth. I'm very glad to be here and help everybody today with Google Ads.
There you go. Okay. So for people who have not been to one of our Concise webinars before, these are meant to be 100% educational. We're not trying to sell anything. We don't have sales pitches. We are hoping to provide you with information that you can take away and use. This webinar is being recorded. You are very welcome to ask questions as we go through, and there'll also be time at the end to have questions at the end. So feel free to type questions into the chat if you do have something that occurs to you. Before I hand over the talking stick to Gareth, this webinar about how to get better results from Google Ads assumes one of the key points. We haven't actually gone into detail about the most important thing, and that is when you are running Google Ads, advertise things that people are searching for. That is the key, one of the keys to success. If people aren't searching for something, then you're probably wasting your time advertising for it. Okay, and now with that, I'm going to hand over to Gareth. Take it away, mate.
Thank you very much. Okay, I must stop saying so look, Google Ads I have been using probably almost since it came out, which is when I was almost a little kid. So the first thing I always say to clients or anyone who's interested in Google Ads is just remember who you're dealing with. You're dealing with a giant American company who is driven by shareholders. So as much as Google pretend to be the nice people, and they'll happily give you all of these things for free, their angle is always to deliver shareholder returns. So just be very, very cautious of some of the phone calls you'll probably get, emails you'll get, information that you'll read on the internet. A lot of it is very much skewed into getting you to spend more money on ads. So what I had suggested that we do on this webinar was just give you some quick little tips that will help you save a few bucks. And these are things that I've learned over the last 10 years or so that basically generate results for clients. So one of the most important things that is easily misunderstood is the concept of keywords and keyword types. So the idea of keywords is pretty straightforward in that these are the terms that you want to rank for. But what Google conveniently leave out of the campaign setup, unless you know what button you're pushing, is the different types of keywords and how they apply to triggering ads. Keep in mind, the more ads that Google can trigger for you, the more likely someone's going to click and the more likely they're going to make some more money out of you. So a lot of clients don't spend anywhere near enough time looking at their keywords and really thinking about their keywords. I would generally suggest avoiding any automated suggestion or automated list of keywords that the Google bot suggests to you. You really need to put the time and the effort in. So what we're going to explain now is the 5 different types of keywords, and they're split out between broad, phrase, exact, positive, and negative. So this screen here is worth looking for. This is actually from Google themselves. So there is a link there, and if you can't quite see the link, it's pretty straightforward for us to send you one of those. So if you get stuck, please send us an email and we will send it to you. So just working through the different types of keywords. So the standard, the default, is called a broad match keyword, and you don't have any special symbols on that when you set up those keywords. And an example keyword would be something like women's hats. If you had set an ad campaign up with a broad match keyword like women's hats, then you are likely to trigger that ad for misspellings, any synonyms, related searches, and any other relevant variations. But the bot can also be quite good at triggering ads for some fairly irrelevant searches as well that for your business is probably not related. The next one down is called a broad match modifier. I prefer to call this a positive keyword because it's got a plus sign in front of it. Makes it a bit easy to remember. And the idea behind these are that you must have the those words with pluses in front of them, but can be used in any combination. So if you can see there on the example, you can, if you had the keyword set as plus women's and plus hats, then as long as the user used both of those keywords, but in any order and in any phrase, then it would trigger the ad. So the example there, women's scarves and hats would trigger the ad. Winter hats for women would trigger the ad. Okay. They're quite handy, but you do need to be careful because you kind of need to think about all the different scenarios that would apply. My preferred approach is to use phrase match, and that is simply putting inverted commas around the keyword, like the example there for women's hat. So what that means is that the phrase must match in that exact order, but it can be anywhere in that sentence. So, for example, I could use the word blue and have blue women's hats, or I could buy women's hats, or I could have women's hats on sale. So long as the women's and the hats are together inside the phrase, then it would trigger the ad. And then you have an exact match, which is also very useful if you have very specific terms that you're trying to rank for and you don't want to trigger ads for all of the additional sort of variations of those things. Very handy to use, but they are quite time consuming to set up because you really do need to go through all of the scenarios. So to do an exact match, you use square brackets. Very important that they're not round brackets or curly brackets. They have square brackets. And that means that the ad would only trigger for the exact term. But Google does this sneaky little thing where they trigger the ad for what the bot thinks is related. So in that example there, even though we said we only wanted to trigger it for women's hats, because the bot knows that ladies' hats matches with women's hats and hats for women are likely to be in the same thing, then it will trigger for that. And if you want to get around that, then you use what's called a negative keyword. So a negative is simply putting a hyphen in front of the keyword. And so if you really only wanted to make sure that that ad triggered for women's hats and nothing else, then you would put negative ladies, negative for, and the other one would trigger at the end probably as well. So you can have, you can use that, but just be careful of that. If the bot thinks it's related, then you will still trigger an ad. I don't particularly like Google's example because it is skewed for them to make more money. So this is my example, and I'll demonstrate on screen in a second. This particular one, Indian food, right? So if you're a business and you're a restaurant and you're selling Indian food, you would probably think that you would want to trigger an ad for Indian food. Fairly straightforward concept. So a typical sort of unassuming client would come along and do a broad match keyword for Indian food. That would trigger all sorts of things, which I'll show you on screen in a second, like recipes, spices, basically anything that the bot thinks of that's remotely related to Indian food, it's going to trigger. An Indian food safari, I think there's a TV show that's related about it. So you really wouldn't want to use a broad match key term if you were a restaurant in Perth selling Indian food. Even if you used a phrase match, the Indian food like that, any word that's used either side of that, so things like Indian food recipes or Indian food spices, that would still trigger the ad. So again, probably not that handy. Exact match, that also would be quite a good approach. However, because it's not specific to restaurants or takeaway or those kind of keywords, it's still likely to trigger an ad for not what you intended to do. So when you're building a campaign like this, it's very important to use negatives and positives together. So if I was a restaurant, I would want a negative keyword to be recipe. So anytime anyone typed in Indian food with the keyword recipe, then it would stop my ad from triggering, because I'm a restaurant and I don't sell, I don't want people just looking for recipes and clicking on my ad. So that would be how you'd perhaps combine a phrase match with a negative keyword. So you had Indian food as the phrase, and then you had negative recipe And then you could also have a positive, and you could have, say you're the best restaurant in your location, then you could use positive with the word best. So if I typed in something like the best Indian food in Melbourne, because I've got best in there and I've got Indian food, but then I've added in Melbourne, then that would trigger my ad. So if I'm a business in Sydney, I would want to make sure that I had a negative keyword on the word Melbourne, or I set my location for my ads to show only in Melbourne. However, if you're going to do that, you have to be careful, because you may have a scenario where there's someone in Sydney Airport who's coming to Melbourne for the weekend, who is going to type in the best food in Melbourne. And if your ads are only set to show in Melbourne, then you would not show those ads. So Google Ads on the face of it looks fairly simple, but it does actually require quite a trained brain, if you like, to think about all the different combinations and all the different scenarios, and it really comes down to knowing your business really well. I assume there's no questions because I can't see any coming in. If people are just, their brain has been melted, then you can watch it again later. We are recording it and it'll be on YouTube. I am going to now show you a very handy little tool that we use. Unfortunately, it is paid for, but it's really not very expensive. I think it costs something like $10. So it is a paid tool, but it's a really cheap one. So, but it is extremely handy. And I'm just going to share my screen. And if Richard, you could do the honors and tell me if you can see my screen clearly.
Indeed, I can.
Good stuff. Okay, so this little tool that I'm going to show you is called Keywords Everywhere. If you just Google Keywords Everywhere, like that, and the first one that comes up is the app that I'm talking about. It installs itself into Google Chrome in the browser, so you have to use Google Chrome, and it's a little plugin up here. I'm not going to talk you through all of the options, but the one that's really important is to have the country selector, so you can change what country you're in or what country you're trying to look at. And I'm just going to keep it on Australia for now, but really important because all the data will skew. So this is really handy for looking for new opportunities. So I've used the terms that Google's example suggested. And so for women's hats that I've got at the top here, there's a little strip that appears underneath the keyword up here when you've got keywords everywhere on. So you can it can get a bit annoying if you're just browsing for your new washing machine. So you can turn it off very easily, but since I do this nearly all day, I've got it on all the time. So this tells you a number of different things. So the first part is volume, and what this is the number of searches in a month. So MO for a month in the location I set. So for women's hats, there's 12,100 people per month typing in that term in Australia. I'll just skip over to the little blue bars at the end here. This is a graph of trend over time. So this gives you a bit of an idea about how people are evolving, and this is very useful if you have a product that is either seasonal or is a bit of a fad product. We have a few clients that have products that have all of a sudden come on the market and everybody wants one. So this gives you a bit of an idea of how volume is, and this helps you sort of allocate budgets and traffic and so on. The other information that's shown on the screen here is one called CPC, and that stands for cost per click, and that gives you a rough idea of how much it would cost to have an ad for that. It's not entirely accurate, and I'll explain why in the next part of the webinar, because it is related to something called quality score, but it gives you an idea of if I had an ad under women's hats, it would cost somewhere in the vicinity of 99 cents per click. You've then got another little one here called competition, and this says 0.18. It's a percentage, so that's the same as saying 18% or 1.8 out of 10. So 1, if there's a 1 in that, that's as hard as it gets. So it gives you an idea of where opportunities lie that are easy or low cost, and so on. So I've used a couple of examples. Ladies' hats. So there's only 880 people a month searching that, slightly higher cost per click, but extremely competitive, which I find really interesting because women's hats has 12,100 people, but ladies hats only has 880 people, but is far more competitive. So that to me says that these companies here that are competing for these ads haven't really considered that maybe they should be looking under women's hats because it's easier and there's a lot more volume. So that's where Keywords Everywhere can be really handy. The other example that was given by Google is blue women's hats. And here we can see a number of blue women's hats that are being triggered. However, what I find extremely interesting is that there is absolutely no volume whatsoever in Australia for blue women's hats. So some of these companies that are triggering ads under that are pretty much wasting their time because they didn't go and see if there's anyone in the market looking for something in the first place. Women's hats on sale, again, used in the example. A lot of people competing for ads, but hardly any volume. There's only 10 people a month. So Keywords Everywhere is a really handy tool to work out what the market is, and it kind of gives you some insights into whether there's people in the shopping center or not, and on what day, what country they're in, what stores they're wanting to look at, what their needs are. So anytime you're going to run an ad campaign or maybe even do SEO, because the same thing applies, then you should always start with a keyword research tool like Keywords Everywhere in the first place, because that will help you work out whether or not you should be running any ads. Just for example, I've done the Indian food again. So Indian food, 14,800 people a month, a bit more expensive, but really low competition. And then Indian food recipes are only 100 a month and hardly any competition. So it gives you a bit of an idea that how the user is working in Google and what they're interested in looking for by having a look at some of these key terms. So with that, unless there's any questions or demonstrations, I will go back to the presentation. Okay, so that's Keywords Everywhere. If you can't use Google and can't find it yourself, you're more than welcome to send either Richard or myself an email, and we will send you a nice link you can click on. Otherwise, moving on. The other big ticket item that Google conveniently leaves out of any article or guide, or and I'm pretty convinced a lot of people that pretend to know lots about Google Ads don't even know anything about the quality score either. And so what quality score is, and we have done a previous webinar on this, which is in far more detail. So if you don't get the exact idea straight away from this, then you're more than welcome again to watch the more detailed version that we've already got up on our website. But the quality score is probably the most important part of the whole algorithm for how Google chooses what ad to show and how much you pay, right? And I'll try and briefly explain it with a few tables. If you're not a maths person, probably go make yourself a coffee. If you are a maths person, you'll probably pick this up really quickly. But I will try and go through it slowly. So in this table here, the first column, we have 3 different websites, A, B, and C. Very simple. A quality score is a score out of 10, which the Google algorithm gives your ad and your website every time the ad is triggered. So every time the user types in a search term, the quality score is recalculated constantly. So just because you've got a 9 out of 10 now doesn't mean you'll have a 9 out of 10 next week. But just keep that in mind. But it's a score about how important and how relevant you are for the term that is at hand. So A, they're really relevant. They've got a 9 out of 10. B, they're okay. They're a 5 out of 10. C, not very relevant. They're a 2 out of 10. Okay. Each of those website advertisers, when they set up their Google ad campaign, they put in a maximum cost per click bid, much like an auction. So A has said 50 cents, B has said 70 cents, and then C has said $1.20. Keep in mind that each website owner cannot see what the other website owner has got from a quality or a cost point of view. So it's only in my example that you can see all of them together. What the bot then does is it times these numbers out very simply to give you a score called a position rating. Okay, don't misunderstand that for position. It's a position rating, like a score. So the first one, 9 times 0.5, 4.5. Next one, 5 times 0.7, 3.5, 2 times 1.2, 2.4. Okay, very simply, the advertiser with the highest score would get first place. Next highest score gets second place. Next highest score gets third place. Very simple. But here comes the clincher. What Google then does, and which I think is probably one of the fairest things I've ever seen in advertising, and I believe is the reason why Google has completely excelled from a business point of view. And if I was a smarter 18-year-old when I started using this, I would have put every dime of money that I had into Google Shares. Unfortunately, I didn't, which is why I'm still doing a webinar for you today. And so what has happened here is the Google bot will only charge you what it costs to beat the person below you, much like an auction. You know, if you say you're prepared to pay $1 million for a property that you want to buy, and the next best bid is only 500,000, you'd be mad to pay the million, because you could probably get it for 510,000. Very simple. So if you look at each example, in order to get the best position, all it needed to get was a 3.6 because the next best bid was 3.5, the score. So Google then works backwards and says your actual bid only needs to be 40 cents because your quality score is so strong, and you'll be able to retain a first place position. So they're paying a lot less than everybody else. Let's say advertiser B comes along and says, well, I want to be first. I now need to get a 3.7 to be the next best score. So the 5 out of 10 quality score applies, and you've got 74 cents cost per click bid. So you're paying nearly double what A is to get the same spot. Let's then say C comes along and says, well, I want to be first. So they've now got to get a 3.8, and because their quality score is so low, it's a 2 out of 10. The cost per click bid has to be $1.90. So they're paying nearly 4 times, in fact, nearly 5 times as much as advertiser A because their quality score is so low. So anytime we ever look at a new ad account with a client, particularly if they're spending more than about $500 a month, because if you're spending less than $500 a month, getting a 10% improvement is only going to save you $50, and it's probably not worth the time spent on it. But if you're spending $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 or more a month, then 10% improvements start making a big difference in dollar terms. And again, keep in mind, Google doesn't want you to know this, because if you're happy to pay them $1,000, and they'll happily take it off you. So I'm just going to show you now where to find this information, because again, they conveniently hide it from the default view. So Richard, if you could care to do the screen viewing check test.
It's loaded for me.
Good stuff. So this is a Google Ad account. And so where you get to the quality score information is down on the left-hand side. Under keywords, you have search keywords, okay? And then you then go to columns, modify columns, scroll down to the one that says quality score, tick the one that says quality score, and then tick apply. This will then add a column to all of your keywords that tells you how much your quality score is out of 10. So this particular example here has a 7 out of 10. Next one down, this has a blank in it, and that's only because the ads haven't triggered. So there hasn't been any searches for this shop development company in New Zealand. So there hasn't been any ads triggered, and that's why the quality score is not shown. So really handy thing to do if you've got an ad account, make sure you've got the quality score on there. Make sure that you are getting as best as you can. And if you're competing in a expensive industry, something like law firms, I think are the most expensive ones I've seen lately, or finance, when they're paying in the vicinity of $50 a click, the quality score is extremely important because of the cost saving. Okay, I'll just jump back to our presentation. hopefully that all made sense. We have done a more detailed quality score webinar. So if you want to watch one in more detail, please send either of us a quick email and we'll send you the link. No problem. Google, in their wisdom, are now currently offering some free ads for people. There are quite a lot of conditions. It's not a massive amount of money, but it is free. At the moment, any ad account, as long as you go through a partner, I think, which is someone like us, then you can get a $150 ad credit once you start triggering some ads. So if you are going to do it, or you are doing it at the moment, we can apply the credit on your behalf, and you get $150. They do this from time to time. They certainly don't give out any more than a couple $100, but it is free money, so you might as well. One little extra little tip that does get a few clients stumbled sometimes is the way that Google charges you. And they, being a faceless monster, everything is done by credit card, and everything is done by direct debit. The ads will automatically turn off if that credit card declines, and they don't particularly do a very good job of letting you know if that has happened. I find you generally don't know about it until it's a bit too late. They also have a $1,000 charge limit. So if you're spending $30,000 a month on ads, they will charge you $1,000 every day, rather than one bill once a month. So just make sure that whoever does your accounting or who has the keys to the credit card is on top of that, because it can often turn ads off without anyone knowing about it. And a sort of a bit of a naughty practice, if you like, in the industry is some companies that manage ads on behalf of other clients, is that they don't give you access to the ad manager, and then they mark up the cost of the ads, because remember, you only pay when someone clicks. So make sure that you are actually paying what Google is charging, and you're not paying a margin. I don't believe that you should be paying a margin on traffic, unless that's how your management fees put together. Just have a look at that. If you are trying to choose an agency, just make sure you pick someone who bills for their time or an outcome rather than a margin, because it's pretty easy for them to rack up the bill pretty quickly and not do hardly anything at all. And yeah, okay, so there's just a question coming from Melissa. Can you please restate the path to adding quality score from... Okay, sorry, Melissa, if I did that a bit quickly. So I will just share my screen again so everyone can see. Okay, so once you've got into the Google Ad Manager, which is this, on the left-hand side, go down to Keywords and then Search Keywords. Once that page is loaded, then look over to the right-hand side for the little button that says Columns over here. Click that, and then click Modify Columns. And then you should see this load up, and then it's hidden right down the bottom called Quality Score here, this one. And then make sure you've got the first one mentioned, Quality Score, ticked. And then Apply. And then what will happen then is the column will appear on the right-hand side. Okay. Alrighty, if there's any other questions, oh, we've got a thanks, so that's good. That means I answered the question. Okay, I believe my duties are fulfilled. Back to you, Richard.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just on quality scores, there are 3 components to quality scores, and as Gareth mentioned, we did a webinar on this last year. It's all still very relevant. The 3 components of what makes up a quality score is your click-through rate, the relevancy, and the landing page experience. And you can see the scores that Google gives you for each of those if you add those columns in as well. So there we go. That's been a quick run through about how to get better results from Google Ads. The next webinar, which is in 2 weeks' time, is how to get better results from Facebook ads. And so there's a theme here, and this is called How to Get Better Results. Now, someone's asked a question which says, is there a Google Ads for idiots beginner's guide. I've tried a few campaigns and they died quickly. Well, it is there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to know, and there probably is a Google Ads for Idiots guide. Try Googling it. But I don't know, Gareth, how would you answer that one?
Look, personally, I would. It's a very tricky one to, because it really does take experience and practice. What I recommend to many people, if you want to learn and you want to do it yourself, spend the time getting the account set up, but don't turn anything on. So play with all the interfaces, get all the keywords in there, set all the campaigns up, set all the ads up. Don't turn any of it on, so you don't pay. Then pay someone, not necessarily me, but someone to go through and check it for you. Don't, whatever you do, listen to the Google people that call you up and tell you all this wonderful stuff about how they can improve your campaign, because all they're trying to do is sell you more stuff. You really need to invest the time in it, and I would very much encourage anyone who's willing to DIY this to start with the keyword traffic in the first place and start with keywords everywhere, which is why I suggested this, because you have to know whether or not there's volume there in the first place, and what the keywords are and what the intent of the user was and what they had intended to do, and then you follow that journey through the whole thing. I'm not trying to sell our services. That's definitely not what I'm suggesting, but it's fraught with danger, and particularly with these keyword matching types, what looks like a simple little symbol has a huge meaning inside the ad manager from a phrase match point of view, a negative match point of view, location. There's a lot of options in the menus that are very much hidden if you don't know that they're there. So it is worth paying someone who does know what they're doing to check your work if you are going to do something like that.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, I said at the start, and it may have seemed flippant, but it was in fact probably one of the key things: advertise things that people are searching for. If people aren't searching for something, then there's very little point in running search ads for them. Another question's come in about retargeting. Gareth, do you want to just quickly explain what retargeting is?
Sure. So retargeting is when you go to a website. Let's say I'm going to buy a woman's hat. Not that I plan on wearing one anytime soon, but if I was going to buy a woman's hat and then I went on the website and I had a look at the hats and then I decided that I didn't want to buy there and then, that advertiser could then show me a reminder, half a reminder, on my Facebook or my Instagram or somewhere else on the internet to remind me to come back. That's called retargeting. Retargeting or remarketing, same thing. That is managed through the Google Ad Manager. Only shows in the Google Ad Display Network, which is Google's Android devices, any app that has what's called AdSense, any website that has AdSense in it. You cannot control remarketing on Facebook or Instagram from the Google Ad Manager. A lot of people misunderstand that. You have to set up remarketing from the relevant platform where you want to show those ads.
Okay, and there's another question about what is a good keyword volume. For example, how many searches per month is worth bothering with?
Yeah, okay, excellent question. For that question, I'm going to share my screen again and go back to keywords everywhere. So you have to look at the keyword and the likely intent of the user, right? So this woman's hat's on sale, okay? While the volume is low, there's only 10 people a month. It's quite a specific term, which means that someone is very likely to want to buy something for that. So even though there's only a handful of people, it would be worth running an ad on that because the intention of those people is very high. So you'd likely get very good conversions. Whereas women's hats, even though there's a lot of volume, the intention, there's going to be people browsing, and like I might need a size large. So if I click on one of these ads, that advertiser has paid. However, if they don't have a hat that's a large one, then me, the user, is not going to buy it. So don't necessarily chase after the volume. but avoid the ones that don't have any volume. So if there is zero, like if you're a company that is planning on selling women's hats, don't just go and order 10,000 blue ones without checking whether or not there's anyone looking for it, because this is helping you work out what the market wants. If you're looking for a new product to sell, go and check the volume, particularly if you're an e-commerce business. It's very handy from that point of view.
Actually, Gareth, do you want to just show what's on the right-hand side of your screen there with related keywords and people also search for? Because this is part of Keywords Everywhere, that the information that also is that you get on your browser page. So this comes from that.
So when you type in a keyword, if you have Keywords Everywhere turned on, then it also suggests some other words. And it gives you the volumes in a bit of a table format. So this is pretty handy for getting keyword ideas. Like say blue women's hats, people do want beige hats or beige caps, sorry, or red hats. So it helps you kind of think about what the user is wanting to find.
Yeah. So there's a lot of additional information there, and it's such a simple tool. And as Gareth mentioned, you do pay a little bit. I think it's something like $20 or $10 for about 100,000 bits of information. So it's very good value as a research tool. Our guys who do this work all the time use other tools in addition to it, but this as a handy tool for just having an initial piece of research is really useful, very helpful. Okay, well, that's probably about it. If there's any more questions, please feel free to add them in now or send us an email afterwards. We'll wrap up now. Thank you very much for coming along. As Gareth mentioned, this has hopefully been recorded. It'll be loaded up onto our YouTube channel and will be added to our website. And we also do get these transcribed. So if you want to see more information and be able to read it through and get more clarity on it, then feel free to see the replay webinar on our website. Thanks again, everybody. Thank you, Gareth. That was a good session, and hopefully people got a lot from it. And thank you, Melissa and Tony and other people for your questions. Much appreciated. Have a great day, everybody, and all the best. Thank you.